Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Hillyard, and today I'm joined by Robin Grabfelder and Michelle Dench. This particular meeting came about as a result of the three of us chatting together after other EA Zoom meetings. We had a couple of pretty fun discussions to the extent that we commented we should have recorded this. So after the second time this happened, we decided to put something on the schedule. And here we are, 3 Gemini moons about to chit-chat. So here's the chart for the moment on May 20th, 2023. Of course, the moon is in Gemini today, which we chose along with Juno. And for my location here in California, they're both in the 9th house. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the moon is also out of bounds, which is something that we didn't plan to talk about, but I just wanted to point it out in case it comes up later. So this slide shows the three of us, the connections in our charts. Michelle's Gemini moon is a little over 3 degrees, mine is about 7.5, and Robin's is 14.5. And then they're ruling our Cancer placements, 3 out of the 4 of which are all conjunct. Robin's Venus conjunct my ascendant, conjunct Michelle's North Node. So we thought we'd start off by talking about what the moon signifies in a birth chart, some characteristics of the moon in Gemini, and a little bit about Mercury. Each one of us will talk about our own Gemini moon and how we see it in our chart. Then we'll explore some specific transits to a couple of them and go from there. Who knows where we'll end up? Our objective is to have fun while we show that although we all have the moon in the same sign, there are countless possibilities of ways it can play out in a chart. So is there anything either of you two ladies would like to add to this before we jump in?
I would just say one of the funny things that I think I've noticed over time is how many astrologers there are with Gemini.
Right.
And I mean, the fact that we've come together in this way, obviously synchronizing our Cancer, for me, North Node, Ascendant and Venus, and the moon, they're all deeply personal signatures. And a part of the emergence of these conversations is like after I would do an EA Zoom talk, then we'd stop the recording and start talking about just like the real personal application of the teachings or the personal impact or the personal reflection. And so anyways, that developed this relationship, which I just feel so grateful to be able to join you two for this, because it was so fun to discover all of that.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. I was also noticing how many astrologers have the moon in Gemini.
Yeah, it's pretty, yeah, it is. That's pretty fascinating. We just like to talk, I guess.
Well, also we have great curiosity.
Yeah, my sense is that there's endless things that you can learn about astrology.
Yes.
You can study it for a lifetime and never know everything there is to know. And
Exactly.
that leaves a Gemini moon like a kid in a candy shop.
Yep.
With a free pass to anything they want for the rest of their life. So
exactly.
So well said. I say that all the time. The more I learn, the more I want to learn, the more there is to learn. So yeah. Okay, so shall we move on? Robin, you want to tell us a little bit about what the moon signifies in a birth chart?
Okay. So similar to the manner in which the moon reflects the sun's light onto the earth, it serves as a mirror that reflects our self-image back to us, providing an opportunity to see and know ourselves and become consciously aware of who we are. The moon is associated with our emotional needs, how we nurture ourselves, and the way we seek security and comfort. It reflects our early childhood experiences, our relationship with our mother or primary caregiver, and how we express and process our feelings. Representing our emotional and instinctual nature, it reveals patterns of behavior that we carry from other lives. These patterns can be so well ingrained that they're like the grooves of our record that become an instinctual fallback, perpetuating what is familiar to help us feel secure. The reflective nature of the moon reveals our sensitivity to our immediate environment, and we use our moon to protect our feelings of insecurity and vulnerability. As the moon goes through cycles of waxing and waning, we also experience periods of expansion and contraction, growth and introspection. And by observing the moon's transformations, we can gain a deeper understanding of the fluid nature of our own self-image and how it evolves over time. Symbolizing our deepest needs, instinctual reactions, and emotional responses, the moon reflects the core of our inner self. So by examining the moon's placement, sign, aspects, and house positions in our birth chart, we can gain insights into our emotional experiences and evolutionary lessons. When we have the moon in Gemini, we seek security and nurture ourselves through the acquisition of information. When we feel insecure or vulnerable, the first thing we do is we go to study, read, or talk, or do anything that we can to learn and inform ourselves as much as we can. We just seek information wherever we can get it. We feel we need to talk or communicate with others about our feelings, and there's a need to share our ideas. And like a child with endless curiosity, there's a need to continually explore a variety of interests. So Gemini moons being mutable, we thrive on change and exploration, and we continually seek new interests and ideas to fuel our endless curiosity. Is there anything that you would like to add, Michelle or Sue?
So well said. I'm not sure. I mean, I could just kind of reiterate that I was amazed to understand that the moon reflects the sun. I thought that was a really interesting concept, and also what you were saying about understanding emotions. We look for information. I mean, that's Dr. Google. I want to know more about this.
Yeah.
When you were talking about that piece, I realized like, oh yeah, how do I process my feelings? And then I looked right over next to me and I have, my ongoing research and my notes, that's essentially the nature of my Gemini moon. And I think that because of the Gemini, it's never just like one. No, I have 3 journals here.
Mm-hmm.
I have 3 of the same kinds of books. It's.
And how many tabs do you have open on your computer?
Well, I closed them all just to make sure that nothing, but I had a lot of tabs, and I will, often be going, back and forth. And it's like, it's not just integrating emotions or the way we see, the way we feel our feelings or verbalize our feelings, right? It's all also connected to the Mercury function and how feeling and communication are, one.
Yeah, exactly.
Mind, right?
It's hard for us to separate the two.
Yeah.
They can't be. And I don't know if you saw me laughing hysterically, and I'm not going to turn my computer to show you my pile of books and papers and, I even got a clipboard. so I could keep track of some of it. And I said to Robin right before, I'm not going to mess with, because I've got a little pile that you can kind of see in the corner here. I said, I'm not going to mess with it because I might have an avalanche.
Yeah, my piles drive my husband crazy.
Piles of papers.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so Michelle, would you like to speak about Mercury's function?
It's hard to think about a Gemini moon without thinking about Mercury. And, Mercury is the function of communication. So I started talking about it, but it was really how we process, think about, organize, articulate, and share thought. Gemini being a sign that really has so much to do with what the information that is coming through, right? And it's information coming through, in our case, the moon, feelings, emotions, but also the way that we, I think, see the world. And Mercury is the expressor of that, I think. For me, I have Mercury retrograde in Aquarius, combust the sun, and the learning how to use my voice, to write, to articulate, to share information has been an ongoing process of evolution. And I think of everything from the perspective of like, what's the learning, right? If Gemini is the lesson, Mercury is the message of the lesson, right? It's like I'm constantly, when I'm taking notes, I'm rarely taking notes of actually what people say. I know I'm sure all of you guys take your notes differently, but for me, taking notes are about capturing the message. It's about, making a map of the story. It's about being able to synthesize the information that's coming through the filter of the moon in this case. And Mercury is one of those planets that, because it's so deeply personal and it's similar to the moon, and it's such a fast moving body, it's really reflective of the way in which Gemini works, right? There can be two streams of consciousness moving simultaneous to one another. There can be two thoughts or a seeming split in the mind. And the way I look at that from that perspective is that Mercury is the bridge between those thoughts, ideas, messages, that we receive in whatever way that we're receiving it. So relative to wherever the Mercury placement is. And then if the planet is retrograde, from an evolutionary perspective, it's also reflecting the deeper soul dynamics and the deeper work that is being done to learn how to articulate. So I can use an example in my own life. When I was a little girl, there was a couple of stories that I was told. One in particular, that when I would sing, I had a kindergarten teacher who sang off key. And so my mother told me this story. This is a very good Gemini moon Mercury story. My mother told me this story that I tried to mimic the teacher. And so I learned to sing off key. So my whole life, I believed that I couldn't sing because I sang off key, based on this story that I received at a very young age. And I felt like, oh, my voice isn't beautiful and I can't sing. I sing off key. And it's been a long-term process, especially now that I've been I have children, in a relationship with a musician who sings, who loves to sing, who wants to sing and harmonize. And I am having to deconstruct really old ideas about myself, about my voice, about my limitations, and discover something, different. And so I've been researching, voice stuff and how to sing and learning about, and pushing myself to put myself out there. Like in my recent new moon ceremony that I did yesterday on the Gemini moon for the new moon in Taurus, I sang at the end of the transmission for the ceremony, and it was super vulnerable. I sang a song that I received that had, that I had never really shared with a lot of people, but that I received the lyrics and the melody. And actually that even in of itself has been a newer thing. And that's a bit of like, there's a little bit of Venus in there in terms of song archetypally, but for me, the soul evolution around that has been relative to this old story that I received, and how that's been a big learning for me over time. So
that's fascinating. I think I can't sing as well. And in fact, my father used to, tell me I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. So I don't sing. And my Mercury
story.
I know. And my Mercury is retrograde as well, stationary retrograde at the bottom of my chart. So so I wonder if this is something, a story that I can ditch.
I used to have a story that I couldn't spell things, like, right. And it's totally justifiable in my Mercury retrograde. Like I can't spell.
I can't spell either.
I failed spelling in first grade. And ever since then, I can't spell. And one day I was like, okay, I'm not going to tell this story about myself anymore. But I almost didn't get a job because I misspelled the word of the job on my website. Like I had the word financial spelled and it was misspelled only, and I just didn't catch it. It's not like I don't know how to spell financial. I know how to spell things. And the website development didn't catch it. Like it didn't catch in Word for whatever reason. And the reason I got the job was because it was like humbling and vulnerable. And I just was honest about how that mistake reflected, anyways, it was such a deep learning. I did get the job, and I do still have like more sensitivity towards editing. I tend to not do that because of that retrograde Mercury placement. I let other people edit, but I can refine things and I can still catch things. It's usually just not the first time. Like if I look at something misspelled, I might recognize it misspelled the first time, but catch it again if I'm looking at it again. I don't know if that happens for you.
I can be able to spell a word 1 minute and the next minute not be able to spell it. My ability to spell is just very inconsistent, even simple words. I just, for some reason, they don't look right and I can't remember how they go. And also about voice and singing, I know I can't carry a tune, and so I can't sing, but it's like if I could have one talent that I don't have, it would be to be able to sing. I so much wish that I had that ability, and I don't. So
oh my God, I would be Adele any day of the week. If I could play piano and sing my heart out, I would just like work out all my emotions through song.
Yeah. Maybe next life, huh?
Maybe. That's what I'm thinking.
This life. I'm open to evolving.
or yeah, maybe later in this life. Who knows? It sounds like you're on your way, Michelle.
I'm working it.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. So anything else we need to, for background of before we start looking at our charts? because we can move on. Why don't we do that? Okay, so here's my chart. And for me, the moon is in the 11th house. It rules my Cancer ascendant and is therefore my chart ruler. It's disposited or ruled by the stationary retrograde Libra and Mercury, the Libra Mercury in the 4th house, very close to the IC. And the two are in a trine aspect. This connection to me explains that although I have a tendency toward introversion, once I establish common ground with friends or within a familiar group situation, I'm able to come out of my Cancer shell. I was born at night. So in Hellenistic astrology, I have what's called a night chart, and my Gemini moon is termed the sect light. So it has particular significance in that regard. The planets in Hellenistic astrology are divided up between diurnal and nocturnal function, denoting what time of day they are seen as being more effective. And the sect light is likened to the team leader of the day or the night. Interestingly, Mercury can be a member of either sect, and in mythology is the one who can go back and forth between worlds. The Astrology Podcast has lots of videos about Hellenistic astrology for anybody interested in checking out beyond what I just said. But one of the conclusions I've come to about myself, which took many years of trying to be otherwise and was corroborated after learning about being of the night sect, is that I'm more of a yin internal type rather than being yang or external. I would way much rather stay at home with a good book than to go out to some public function. This is supported by the fact of the dispositor of my moon being stationary and retrograde, like I said, right at the bottom of my chart in the house that speaks of home and family. And in addition, Mercury is in a square aspect to 12th house Uranus and Cancer, which in turn is ruled by my moon. One of my interpretations of Uranus is about unseen helpers and energies that affect us. And for me, sometimes it plays out as too much energy around me, interfering with my communication function. For example, it can manifest as too many thoughts coming in at once or suddenly losing my train of thought. And therefore, I'm a much better writer than an extemporaneous speaker, because all of my 3rd house Virgo can then come in and edit the fragments into a cohesive thought. And obviously, this is why I read everything that I do. Okay, you guys have any comments or questions?
Or are you going to talk about the dispositor?
Oh, the dispositor. Okay, so this was a little side conversation that we all had, because we were talking about the ruler of the Gemini moon, and so then we started talking about the dispositors and how they can sometimes go around in a circle, and like in my case, the Mercury disposits the moon, and then the Venus disposits the Mercury. My sun disposits Venus, and then we're back to Mercury dispositing my sun. So I remember Linda used to talk about this particular configuration. In this particular configuration, the Mercury, Venus, and Sun are the board of directors. They're the ones that kind of run my Gemini moon in this case, and a lot of other things. If you kind of branch it out and put other planets that point into all of these, it ends up always going around in that same circle where the the board of directors is, Mercury, Venus, and the sun.
There's one person who's on the board who's not represented though, and he's important, I think, in this constellation. And that's that Virgo Saturn.
Right.
When I heard you say what your father said about you singing, I was like, oh, where's that Saturn? And, the Saturn rules your descendant and close to that south node,
Close to her sun.
Yeah. And yeah, right in between basically the sun and the south node.
Right.
And so it's ruled by that Libra Mercury retrograde, right? And if we were going to think of it from a natural house perspective, ruling like the 10th house, but in this case, ruling Capricorn 7th house, how the internalization of that need to refine everything, right? And to be, I think of Virgo often as very meticulous, but then Saturn is really saying here, from that yin perspective that you were talking about, I need to be able to go inside and refine everything so that it meets this, expectation that I think others have of me. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. So very true. So very true. And, just like you said that you didn't feel like you were a good editor, that's been, one of my first jobs was as an editor. And I just recently helped Eric Myers edit his Beatles book. So, so editing is my thing. And,
it's a strength that you developed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then to be good with words and, meticulous with words and clear, and refining them as a part of refining self-refinement, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's what I was saying. I think I have to edit. In fact, when I was doing my DMP training, Roger Woolger made a comment at one point that I was editing in bringing out the details of past lives. And it's like, this comes from, many lives. South nodes in Virgo there too, with Saturn. I was a scribe in a past life. I editing and writing and stuff is my thing. Speaking is new, I think.
Yeah, it makes me think of Matthew from the biblical times. The book of Matthew, obviously in the Bible, but Matthew's role in many ways, he was a former tax collector, which is very much a Virgo thing. And he was kind of shunned by the Jewish people because he had been the tax collector. So when he started following Jesus, he was learning the Torah, and he would learn to read it and to write it. And he started scribing Jesus's teachings as he was following Jesus along. Like, that's archetypally that South Node Virgo, Saturn Sun reminds me of that kind of energy. It's like capturing every word because, you're devoted to it and you want to learn and you want to take it in and be able to understand it like from the inside. And there's something deeply familiar and safe actually about being able to edit things before they go out into the world. Pisces, where they can be interpreted by everyone or, even misunderstood. Maybe that would be that square to Chiron in Sag, right? That's like, see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Make sure I don't say the wrong thing for if I'm misunderstood by someone or it's mistake, I'll be
I'll
hurt.
die.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure, I'll die. And you were talking about the purpose of your notes. I mean, when I was in school, I used to write everything. Everything the teacher said was in my notes, and I think that was my way of absorbing the information. I am not an auditory learner either. I'm way better reading information and remembering it. When I hear things, I have to hear them many times before it sinks in. I think for whatever reason, I think I get otherwise distracted or something. But that writing down every word, I'm sure, which comes from past life. Definitely, I know for sure I had at least one life where I died writing down, having to get everything perfect, and I was still writing. I'm still writing.
What does DMP stand for?
Oh, deep memory process. It's
Oh,
it's the what Patricia Walsh teaches.
the past life regression.
Past life regression. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you practice that in your?
I do.
Oh,
I do. Yeah. Yeah. I started doing it. Gosh, I started the training maybe 10 years ago.
that's such a Uranus in Cancer thing, isn't it? Like,
Well, that's interesting that you would say that.
Deep memory, and it's
Yeah.
all, of course, like speaking back to that Mercury, Sun, Virgo, Moon, South Node stuff. Wow.
Deep
How-
memory, emotional content, which is
Yeah.
Yeah, which is healed. I mean, Patricia's website is Heal the Past.
right.
Yeah, it's so much about healing the past and healing that past like suppression, perfection. Like, I have to get this, I have to get it right. I have to get it right. Otherwise I'm gonna, and the Cancer feeling, being able to reclaim feelings and like transmute the past, right? Through feeling memories. That's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah. So I can give you one quick example of a past life. One of the first ones that I did, speaking of Cancer, was of being suffocated by my mother, and who was my mother in this life. And when I was coming in this life, I realized it, and I didn't want to. No, I don't want to do this. I'm not ready, which is another Virgo thing. But anyway, and my mother's Mars is right on my ascendant. She has Mars in Cancer right on my ascendant.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully you had a better relationship this time around.
Yeah, it was a little bit better. Especially toward the end. Definitely. Okay, so shall we move on to, let me clear that. And we ready to move on?
Sure.
Okay, Robin.
Okay.
You're up.
Well, my moon is conjunct my south node in my 6th house, squaring my sun and Jupiter, and my Mars in the 3rd house. And I also have a board of directors because my moon in Gemini deposits to Mercury in Libra, which goes to Venus in Cancer and right back to the moon, making kind of like similar to like a closed loop, like a grand trine. So it gives all 3 of those planets or signs really equal dominance in my chart. although Virgo is also highly important in my chart, being Virgo, Sun conjunct Jupiter. And my moon is in the 6th house of Virgo. So, and as well as my north node, south node. So unlike Sue, I have blockage with writing and feel very uncomfortable writing because it's got to be perfect, and I am just insecure about it saying what it is I think I want it to say. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of blocked in that area. And, you know, I guess because it's in that T-square, the 3rd house, Mars in Pisces, and the Sun and Jupiter in the 9th. Let's see, the moon being in my 6th house, I notice obviously anytime anything transits my moon, it highly affects my work and my health. And having the moon in the 6th house, it's like a double Mercury there, because that rules Mercury also, is ruled by Mercury also. So not only do I want to gather as much information as I can, but then I also want to analyze it all and try to synthesize it and pick out what's most important and relevant and throw away the rest. Which probably part of why I get too caught up, because and then it goes to that Mercury in Libra, which can never make a decision and is always looking at every angle of everything. So it kind of magnifies it. And so then going to Venus also, there's a strong creative desire, and also increases emotional sensitivity and receptivity and intuition.
With that, you know, self-criticism or judgment about, you know, editing or writing or, you know, sharing your voice, is it predominantly rooted in trying to figure out or get in front of what other people think or what other people might think about what you're gonna say? Or
yeah, I'm sure it is that, and whether or not it's conveying what I'm trying to say, both.
Really feel, yeah,
both
yeah,
things,
whether you're being totally honest,
right?
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I've mentioned before, when I was in 1st grade, I was left-handed and they wouldn't allow me to use my left hand, and I was forced to transition over to using my right hand. And I used to get slapped on the wrist or have the teacher twist my skin if I used my left hand. And I remember struggling. You know, I remember sitting at the table and my father trying to practice writing with me, and I remember it being a struggle. And you know, I think that might play into it somewhat.
I'm left-handed too. Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So,
have you ever tried to reclaim your natural writing?
Yeah, I am ambidextrous. I can still write with my left hand. It's not as fluent because I don't normally write with my left hand, but I can write perfectly legible with my left hand.
Yeah, and I suggested, all 3 of us are artists, and I suggested to Robin that maybe she might want to try painting with her left hand.
I came across this painting practice actually that is all about doing stream of consciousness writing and then painting around the writing.
Oh,
that sounds fun,
right? You know, and you take a word or an inquiry or a question you have about yourself, and then you just give yourself like a blank page and you write everything that comes. It doesn't matter what comes. And then you paint like inside the words, around the words, however you want. It's totally free form. But yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. Another thing I noticed, okay, so with Gemini moon in the 6th house is aside from compulsively always studying astrology and similar things, I'm also always, for my whole life, been studying nutrition and health and medicine. And I actually went to school to be a nurse and medical assistant. So yeah, so it also brings out the curiosity. I mean, the main reason that I went into nursing was not so much because I wanted to be a nurse, which I never ended up finishing, but was because I was so interested and intrigued by wanting to understand and learn about how the body functions. And so, and then, you know, the 9th house, the 6th house, 12th house, Mars and Pisces, all that. I am just like always so wanting to learn as much as I can about the function, the physiology of the body and the function of the mind and consciousness and just all of those things.
I see that often with the Virgo, with the strong Virgo and the strong 6th house. People are definitely healers, leaders in medicine, or acupuncturists or things like that. But the other thing that I've been tracking recently is the Hygeia.
Right.
Yeah, and that's often that signature also repeats.
We didn't put that in here. I think I have Hygeia.
Yes, it is here.
House.
It is here, right here.
Oh yeah, all right. So in the 1st house.
In the 1st
right.
house in Capricorn. Yeah. And I wondered about that right away when I saw your chart, Robin. I was like, oh, I wonder if she ended up being in the medical field or does a lot with health. And I just recently got my newest book I'm so excited about is the medical astrology book.
Oh,
which one?
Jeffrey Wolf Green, Medical Astrology.
Oh,
that's a great book. Yeah.
I haven't seen that one.
Really great book. And it's got just really simple, really clearly laid out different pieces about all the houses, the planets, and their medical correlations.
Oh, I have a birthday coming up.
That's one that Linda edited, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. Yeah. And with your Mercury in the 9th house, that to me just screams that you're always going to want to be learning more and more. And
yeah. And it's conjunct my part of fortune.
There you go. And along with your Sagittarius ascendant.
Both of you, we were speaking earlier about retrogrades and retrograde Mercury. Both of you are going to be getting Mercury returns after the next Mercury retrograde, which will be in the Virgo house. And Robin, Venus's retrograde station is right on your natal Pluto. There was something I was noticing about Sue's chart as well. I can't remember what it is, but
well, the Mars retrograde.
Right away, I noticed you're both going to be getting that Mercury, cycle right after the next Mercury retrograde cycle.
Yeah, Robin's and my Mercury are within a degree of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And on the whatchamacallit,
Supergalactic Center.
Supergalactic Center. Yes.
Yeah. Only mine's retrograde and yours is direct.
Right.
And yeah.
And then my ascendant, and then my ascendant's on the galactic center also.
Right.
And Sue's, yours is stationary.
Yes.
Right.
it was just beginning the retrograde cycle.
Yes, it went retrograde about 4 or 5 hours before I was born.
Wow.
So that's
wow.
a strong retrograde.
Yeah,
Wow.
so it's definitely standing still. It has that little S in the
Yeah. Very powerful.
Yeah.
One of the things, like, Robin's south node is on my moon, and your north node is on my Uranus, and our Uranuses trine one another. I know this. And your Venus is all on my north node. Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah.
A lot of
that
connections.
so your moon Uranus opposition is right across her nodal axis.
Yes.
That's a trip.
And didn't you have Saturn involved in it somehow?
Oh, I have my Saturn squaring my nodes. So squaring squaring Venus. Yeah.
And mine's conjunct my north node. Yeah.
Oh, and you have your Saturn conjunct your north node. Yeah. Which is so interesting, because when I met you at first, I thought, oh, she's got to be a Scorpio. She's got to have a lot of Scorpio. And it's like that Scorpio Saturn.
Right in the 8th house too. I mean, I have Pluto
Yeah.
and Sun and Uranus in the 8th.
Yeah. So now it all makes sense.
Yeah, I also have a lot of progressed planet. My Sun and Mercury are progressed in Scorpio right now, and my moon was.
Oh,
Yeah, we didn't even go into the progressed planets. Same here. I've been had a whole bunch of, a shitload of progressed Scorpio over the last few years. We were talking, I think, maybe before we started recording, about our progressed moons finally moving into Sagittarius after being in Scorpio. It just seemed like it just lightened the whole mood. Mine was a couple of years ago, or a few years ago. But and I had a progressed new moon in Scorpio, as did Robin.
Yeah, at the same time.
We should do our next chit chat on progressed charts, progressed moons. We can.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because I had a progressed Scorpio moon that just moved into Sag also. So, we're all sort of like in sync in this funny
progression.
We can compare notes.
That can be our next chit chat.
Okay, that's sounds good to me. Well, shall we move on then to Michelle's chart?
Yes.
Okay, here you go, Michelle.
My little dispositor tree looks like a game of tag. Hide and seek,
Okay, I should probably do one thing that is kind of putting this down here.
There you go.
because what I did was I ended up adding the modern rulers after we started talking about this, because it seemed like it added so much more to depth to your story. Okay, back to you.
It does, and it makes a lot of sense, at least to my mind, because I have this Gemini moon, ruled by Aquarius, Mercury, and one of the most interesting aspects in my chart, the two that I'm trying to really understand and figure out. Well, for one, my soul has been drawn to the Pluto work and to the Jeffrey Wolf Green, evolutionary astrology, for the purpose of understanding this Saturn squaring the nodal axis. And, obviously that Saturn speaks to my Venus. And I had the realization the other day, they're back and forth, right? If you go to Saturn, you go to Venus. If you go to Venus, you go to Saturn. If you go to Pluto, you go to Venus, you go to Saturn. And it's, the ping
All
pong.
roads lead to Saturn.
I cannot avoid that Pluto Saturn, square to the nodal axis. And it's driven everything I'm doing, everything I'm studying, everything I'm teaching, everything I'm integrating and learning in my life is coming through that channel right now, which obviously I had Pluto squaring my Pluto and Pluto on my Venus for many years. And so that kind of initiated me into that realm. But then if you go the other direction of Mercury being ruled by Uranus in Sag, so funny, you can't not end up back at Pluto Saturn, which, and that's the one thing, my Uranus moon opposition, I've never fully come to understand that. And a lot has been coming up for me around Uranus and coming to learn about the power of that Uranus. And, Uranus is the ruler of my descendant, and, and I have Uranus transiting my Chiron right now, opposing, or at least, something. And so then, a lot of these eclipses recently have been on my Uranus, Scorpio axis. And before that, they were on my Sag, Gemini axis. So it's been a really powerful and potent time for me. And, but I can't seem to get away from that Saturn, Venus. So I decided yesterday, who rules that? Who rules it all? I made a final decision, and I decided that Venus rules. That's the thing. I'm giving it to the goddess to take over from here on out, because, I need some help with that Saturn piece. And I think I'm learning, like, one of the things I learned from the Saturn yin perspective, and this relates to my moon, is that learning has been a triple lesson kind of process for me. Like, everything that I've ever done with great importance in my life, I've had to do 3 times. And retrograde, also the nature of the retrograde cycle is a pass during the direct, a pass during the retrograde, and then a pass after the direct. And that has been the story of my life. In order to graduate from college, I had to take college algebra. I met my first husband in the algebra class. I failed algebra, but I, got a relationship out of that class. And then I had to take it again. I didn't pass the second time. And the third time, I had to find a woman teacher who could teach it to me much more clearly and slowly than everyone else had taught. And I eventually passed and got my degree, but it took much longer. And it took me multiple tries at the same thing to learn something, which is inherently, it's like, I'm a finance professional. I'm a math person. It's not as though I can't learn algebra. It just was the mechanism through which what I was trying to learn didn't work for me the first time. I wasn't really paying attention in algebra class. I was more in love. The second time I was paying attention, but I didn't understand. And the guy that was teaching me didn't communicate in a way that made it understandable for me. And the third time I found someone who really cared to make sure, and I got a B. It wasn't like I was perfect or became an algebra expert, but I've always had to go through these evolutionary processes relative to learning something or passing a test or, succeeding at things that have been challenging, So I think my decision the other day to just let Venus rule the show might help things in the future. I'm not sure.
Well, and as you get older, you might, Saturn in Libra is in a good place. I mean, it's happy in Libra. And however, you were born in that period of time where, it's balsamic to Pluto. You were born right before that Saturn Pluto conjunction that was, huge in the 80s. And so, and all of this stuff is in your third house. Go back to what you were saying to me about, Saturn in the third house. It's and I love what you said about third time's a charm. And I don't know if that has to do with the retrograde or the Saturn.
Yeah.
Makes
I
me
don't
wonder.
either. But it's been a learning experience for me to not necessarily try and get it right, or I don't know. Because also, like, when I became a certified financial planner, that's a 2-day, 10-hour examination equivalent to the bar exam. I failed it the first time. I went back and took it again after taking a serious, in-depth study. And it's another one of those things where it's same thing. I studied really well. I went to a class. The guy taught in sports metaphors. And I know nothing about sports. He was using baseball metaphors and metaphors to teach the class from, late 60s rock bands that I had never heard of. And so nothing made sense to me because I neither knew who these people he was talking about or what he was talking about. And then the third time I went to take the exam again, I found a woman who taught a intensive test taking practice for the test. And I studied with her and I passed the exam and I was 7 months pregnant. It was all energy to complete it. And I finally did, but it took me again 3 tries. So when you said that, I was like, oh, maybe my third husband will be the one.
Well, and
I don't even have a second husband.
and you do have, Venus in Capricorn. So,
Is your reception there?
yeah, well, yeah. And that's what she's talking about,
Yeah.
the thing going back and forth between the Venus and
Right.
and Saturn, and and your Venus is retrograde too, right?
It is.
Yeah. So yeah,
it's a lot of learning going on there between the Saturn and the Venus.
I've decided that life is a journey of learning, and it's the bottom line. We're learning how to know ourselves as love, how to love one another, and that's pretty much all there is to it. Everything else is the curriculum,
Well,
Right.
that pretty much sums up your Saturn Venus. I agree. I think, what I mean, I put it a little differently, but I think that we're always learning, and that if we stop learning, then we die.
Mm-hmm.
I won't stop learning until I die. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, our Gemini moons are a little more focused on it, but yeah, everybody is always learning, whether they're aware of it or not.
It's true.
But yeah, that's quite a story you have with the Saturn in Libra squaring Venus and the nodal axis. It's
Ongoing learning. I'm trying to just resolve myself through that North Node in Cancer. And yeah, we'll
and it's
see.
also
On
in the
North
house
Node
of
of
service.
Saturn.
Oh, where's the North Node of Saturn? Oh, yeah, it's right there. Oh, man. Well, maybe I do respond to Saturn. You know, one of the things that has happened for me in really surrendering to Saturn is to figure out what it means to be disciplined and devoted to something. And like, to become an astrologer and really learn how to talk about astrology in the way that I love talking about it. I love teaching it. I love learning about it. So I'm like committed myself to doing a weekly video every week, just showing up, looking at the chart, talking about what I see, and developing myself as more of an intuitive channel, which I think is trying to access that Uranus, in Sag in many ways. And it's been amazing, the growth that I've experienced in doing that, going from like nobody watching my videos and, nothing, to really developing a way that people love to watch and people respond, and they're, so it's been a great learning that Saturn can be a really good thing, and I have to get out of my own way when it comes to judgment or being critical or being harsh, with myself or others. But I definitely think that, and it's taught me like that failure actually is not a thing. Like I've failed, and because I failed again and again and had to keep going until I get it right. I have a relationship of appreciation to the process of failure, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So
yeah, you're maybe flipping the story on what failure is. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the analogy of Michael Jordan, and how many times he missed, and
oh yeah,
in throwing, throwing free throws, and also how many times he made it.
well, even one time a woman reached out to me after watching one of my videos where I talked about failure, and she was like, I can't watch you anymore because you use this word failure, and you should just remove that word from your vocabulary, which is a very like Mercury retrograde, Saturn retrograde kind of thing. And I've really thought about it, the point that she was making about how there are certain words in our language and in our vocabulary that are limiting in and of themselves. But I think you can't remove something until you fully accept it, until you fully love it. Like, to do that creates a shadow relationship to something that it is an experience that people have,
right.
And yeah, and then maybe I will get to some point where I don't ever see or use the F word anymore. But
Well, and the fact that you're doing it, to me, says that you're not failing. I mean, you're doing it. You're not.
it's not failure. It's true.
It's not failure. And the other thing that I wanted to say about Saturn is, I remember reading something a few years back that Saturn is not necessarily about working harder, but working smarter.
Yeah.
And I think, I've always felt like I worked, Saturn has always been a part of my life, and I could, venture a guess that it is for you, being there, in your third house conjunct Pluto. That, I mean, it's part of your mentality, just plodding along, and one step, left, right, keep going, and all that. But then when I got this, when I heard this about, working smarter, it got me to thinking about, I don't have to work that hard. Life does not have to be that hard. I don't have to have that attitude that, that it's hard.
Well, I love that perspective, because I do feel like one of the gifts of my Saturn and also my Capricorn Venus is the ability to organize and manage a lot, and like the Jeffrey Wolf Green Association of Evolutionary Astrologers came out of an idea that I had that I shared with my partner, and then that idea led to another idea, led to another conversation, and it's become something even
a big program.
It's amazing. And now we're organizing an EA conference, which I'm super excited about. But like, I'm the back end administrator of all of that, like the website I created, the structure, and it's really like something that I have been able to give birth to, that I feel really proud of. And it's not even me. Like, I'm not one of the teaching astrologers. It's not for me. It's dedicated and devoted to the lineage of evolutionary astrology and to Jeffrey Wolf Green. And that Saturn organization has really helped me to be able to bring together that it's amazing to me. So, yeah. There's
Yay.
a lot of benefits.
I have Saturn conjunct my North Node, but and squared my Pluto, but I have found that it has taken me a long time to really be able to identify Saturn in my chart. I felt like the Gemini kind of overpowered the Saturn, but I'm starting to see where the Saturn is. I just was never really as conscious of it. Maybe because it's in Scorpio.
I would
Hiding.
because it's hiding. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's been taking me a lifetime just to become conscious of where Saturn plays in my chart.
That's interesting. You have Saturn in Scorpio, and Michelle has it with Pluto.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's squared my Pluto. Yeah. She's got the conjunction. I'm at the square.
Yeah.
So many crisscrosses in our charts.
Great.
So, anything else you want to say about your chart, or shall we look at some eclipses?
Look at some eclipses.
Okay. Okay, so this is my chart with the two lunar eclipses in Gemini in Sag over the last couple of years. And the biggest thing is, well, it's across my 11th and 5th house. And before that, because eclipses move, in a counterclockwise direction. Before that, the eclipses were in my 6th house. And so as they went all through my 6th house, I started losing my animals. And I have had a lot of them. Chiron in the 6th house. I have lots of, I've had, dogs and cats. And anyway, so I started losing them. And then as they moved into, the eclipses moved into my 5th and 11th house, I started losing friends. After I lost one dog, after I lost my dog, I started doing artwork, a new kind of artwork for me, printmaking. And I started memorializing my dead animals. And so in this past couple of years, I have it started off with losing Linda right at this. Actually, she was the second eclipse. The first eclipse was when I was starting to do the art, was when I was continuing to do the artwork, and it was really starting to pick up. And then Linda died with this second eclipse. And then I started showing some of my artwork and continuing to do that. Let's see, what else can I say about that? The first eclipse was very close to my moon, and then the second one was opposite on the other, going the other way. Let's see. That's probably about the gist of it. It was just mostly about losing animals and then losing friends. I lost first Linda, and then my neighbor, and then another friend. And interestingly, with eclipses, the second friend who died a year to the date before this last solar eclipse, and we had a celebration of his life. And that solar eclipse ended up being in my 10th house, and that was the first time that I actually went out in public to a public gathering on the day of the solar eclipse in Aries.
That outer eclipse too was a part of your Jupiter return.
Right, that's true. Yeah, I had an extended Jupiter return. Yeah, it was almost exact at that point. And Jupiter, Jupiter doesn't always bring bounty. No. Jupiter, to me, I mean, bounty in monetary terms. To me, it brings. I've noticed that it has brought to me wisdom about a situation, or grace with what's going on.
Right when you were saying that, I opened to a place in my journal, and literally it says, it has the Jupiter symbol, and it says, Jupiter brings lessons that can change you, blessings that are disguised in what looks like it says shiny options, but I read it as shitty options.
Exactly. I mean,
but it brings lessons. It's not necessarily, all that glitters is not gold when I would think about Jupiter.
Well, and sometimes it can bring exaggerated expectations, which bring disappointment.
Yeah. There's that. And it can also just exaggerate anything that's, that it's shitty.
Yeah.
or good,
It's a magnifier.
Yeah.
So funny. Jupiter brings lessons that can change you, blessings disguised in shitty options.
Well, yes.
Shiny options. Blessings disguised.
Well, I think the blessings disguised in shitty options is perfect.
It's really true. Yeah. So many things happen too with Jupiter lessons. Like when I've had really strong Jupiter transits in my life, it has often meant the ending of things that I thought I really loved or wanted, or, that were really hard to lose, or experiences that were super challenging. But then, hindsight is always when you can see oh, thank God that happened, because this change wouldn't have happened in my life, or I wouldn't have done this, or I wouldn't, or I learned so much about myself through, that period of time. So
I concur completely. I remember, in fact, when we move on to the one that I have for Robin, during the Virgo Pisces eclipses, Jupiter was going over my Venus in Leo, I believe. Jupiter was in Leo going over my Venus, and that was when my dog died. And I remember thinking beforehand, gee, I wonder, being in my second house, I wonder, if I'm going to be, making all kinds of money, or, what'll come to me.
Yeah.
And what it was a gift of grace in the time that I had to spend with him. And, the clarity I got about, our relationship, and what a blessing that he was in my life.
That's interesting too, because it's activating, you would think Jupiter's activating that Venus, but then it's back activating that 6th house and the love that you feel, right? And
yeah,
wow.
And
Powerful.
of course, there is, Pluto next to
That reminded
Venus.
me of the other transit that you're having, the Venus return with the Venus retrograde. So you're going to get 3 passes of that Venus.
Yeah, and the
over both.
Yeah, and the Venus star, the Cazimi, will be right in between my Venus and Pluto.
Mm-hmm.
Be interesting.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Another way I think of Jupiter is new journeys.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't have to be welcome.
Well, no, and some astrologers look, and I'm one of them, look at death as a journey.
Yes.
And
Jupiter is often involved with death.
Yeah, I do see both Jupiter and Mercury in death charts.
Yeah.
Often.
The continuation of the longest journey.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I had a session earlier today where the passing of a dog was a big part of the theme, and I could really feel how that, when that 6th house activation, I remember this when my dog died, it's like you can discover how big your heart is, how much you love, and it was as devastating as losing a child when my dog died. Like, it was just, and I don't know what it's like to lose a child, so I'm not speaking from experience, but that's what it felt like, you know.
And I mean, I don't have any children of my own. I have a stepdaughter, but my animals are my kids. They have been. So yeah, exactly. It was like losing one or more of my kids as we've gone along. Yeah. Interesting. Well, let's look at the one for Robin. This was when the nodes were in Scorpio, Virgo and Pisces, and this eclipse was exactly on your Mercury.
Yes. It was on my Mercury, and the nodes were, the south node was on my Mars in the 3rd house. Let's see, there were so many things. I wrote them down and I don't have them. Mars was on my north node. Saturn was opposing my moon. And Mars was also conjunct Karma.
Chiron on your Chiron and Ceres and the south node on your Mars.
On my Mars, Yeah,
Oh,
so
also
much was
af-
happening.
after your Jupiter return too.
And Uranus was right on my natal, right on my fourth house cusp. And so many things happened from that eclipse. I lost, well, it was on my fourth house cusp. I lost, and conjunct Ceres. I lost my father. They lost their, and then my parents' home. Almost lost my mother, and in a way did, because she got very, very ill. And then I got very ill at that time because also, it affected my sixth house because it squared my south node in the sixth house as well, and widely my moon. So that was a great time of loss concerning fourth house and sixth house health issues and home issues. Losing, your parents' home is kind of like, even if it's not the house you grew up in, for your whole entire childhood. Yeah, I did grow up in that house. So yeah, there was just so many connections happening in that eclipse, and it had such heavy loss associated with it. So there's also a palace return. Where is Igea? Is it in here?
She may not be on this.
I don't see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, because it was the beginning of health issues. My health pretty much broke down. My immune system broke down at that time, and then it went into overdrive.
Interesting.
So, yeah,
like Michelle said, you were also at a Jupiter return.
right.
I wonder if Jupiter retrograded back all the way.
It may have. It's only 6 degrees past.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thing. It was also Venus was moving to oppose Jupiter.
And even if it didn't retrograde past, I mean, the eclipses have, a window. So
Yeah.
it did cross my Jupiter within the window of the eclipse.
Oh yeah, and for sure. And the Ceres Chiron South Node, that to me is probably one of the most profound signatures of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been curious.
It did get back to 13.
Has your health been okay since Saturn entered Pisces recently?
No, my health issues actually, I have had Neptune going over my Mars and Pisces for a long time, and in the third house, and that really affected my immune system a lot. So yeah, so I developed autoimmune issues.
Things I've noticed ever since Saturn entered Pisces is that it's been super challenging for immune. You have to really work hard to stay healthy.
Also bones, issues with bones and skin as well, and gallbladder. So those things are associated.
Interesting.
So yeah, that was a big eclipse. That eclipse probably affected me more than any eclipse in my recent life.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason I chose this is because it was, right on your Mercury, which, since we're talking about the moon, it's
right.
The ruler of your moon, and so it's so exact.
Yeah. And so many interconnections,
right
between the moon and Mars and Jupiter and Saturn,
Right. Yeah. To me, yeah, it's like a definitely put a pin in this in this time frame.
Yeah, and then karma's in there too. So there's, it's obviously some of it was just karmic timing. My parents were old, so. So yeah, that eclipses are often associated with loss. They're not always bad. They can bring good things.
Exactly. And you and I were talking about fearing eclipses, coming. But, I have to say that that these last two eclipses, I finally had the thought that I'm not scared of this one coming, for once. I mean, because I had been dreading the last few, because the last two lunar eclipses were on my Mars, either conjunct or opposite, and this last one was almost to the degree.
Right.
But I don't know what the difference is. There's lots of theories about, what eclipses bring and what they signify. And yeah, I find it
I've had two babies on or around eclipses within 2 days. And I think I very much relate to them in the same way I would relate to evolution and the nodes, that
exactly.
their evolutionary acceleration.
Yeah, I will say a birth did also kind of come out of that eclipse as well, because my daughter did get pregnant very shortly after that eclipse, like, toward the end of that year.
So another thing I noticed about another, odd connection between the three of us is that I was born before two eclipses. Michelle, you were born right after two eclipses, and Robin was born right in between the eclipse seasons.
Wow.
So, I mean, there's some, I don't know what that means.
Interesting thoughts to ponder.
Yeah, exactly. Always. So let's see. Shall we move on and start to wrap up?
Yes.
Okay, I just did this, for reference for anybody else that wants to, look at it. Oh, we didn't talk about the Mercury retrogrades, but here's the dates and the degrees of the eclipses we were just talking about. And then the Mars and Gemini, which we didn't talk about a whole lot. It did go across your moon, Robin, and it stationed on mine. It didn't get quite back to yours, Michelle.
Yeah.
And then the same with these historic Mercury retrogrades. The one in Gemini didn't hit any of our moons. The Libra Mercury retrograde, the Cazimi was at 0 degrees of Libra, so right on, very close to both Robin's and my Mercury's. And then the Aquarius one in 2022, the Cazimi was at 3 degrees, and your Mercury is 10, Michelle?
9. Yeah.
9. Yeah.
That one, I mean, that particular time was a really powerful time for me. It's just before, just around my 40th birthday. And it's interesting. I don't feel like I necessarily remember what was coming up from a Mercury perspective, but I definitely know what I was working on in terms of there's a lot of lessons and learning and changes in that. Those are significant. It basically went from my Mercury back to my Venus, so I was working a lot of Mercury Venus stuff in my life.
A little bit of interpersonal communication types things.
Oh yeah. Still, it's ongoing life lessons. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then just for grins and giggles, I did our composite chart. And of course, we have a
Gemini.
composite Gemini moon. And the Mars retrograde ended right there, which is kind of interesting, and maybe propelled us together. Who knows? The other thing that I found kind of interesting is that we have a composite Jupiter in the third house. So here we are, getting together to pass along and maybe teach a little bit along the way, and good old karma is right there with it. Any other observations you guys want to make before we wind down?
We've got a Saturn in Libra in the second house.
Yeah.
That we do.
First house.
And where's Venus?
Venus with the South Node. Right there.
Oh, right there. Oh,
Yeah.
both of them in Libra. Okay. And so, and Venus is right on Robin's and my Mercury.
Right.
Wonderful.
And the part of fortune is on your sun, right? Isn't that your sun?
It is my son.
Yes. Cool.
Okay, so continue.
Continue to explore that. That's fun.
Exactly.
Uranus is within a degree of my sun.
Oh yeah. Look at that. And Pluto.
Yeah, Pluto is squaring our composite sun. So to speak. So there's a lot of good energy there.
Okay, well, let's see. I don't know. I don't think. Oh, I just had just the references. I'll put these in the description on the video, and our contact information. Thank you. Let's see. I wonder if anybody has any comments. I will ask our participants to unmute and see if anybody wants to make any comments. Go ahead and unmute if you want to.
I know Wanda was asking about that you didn't include the South Node of Mercury.
Oh, I noticed there was I think one of the Jupiter nodes. I noticed this after I like this morning. Wait a minute, all the South nodes, you can't talk. Okay, let's see. Can you unmute, Wanda?
Oh, I think she's saying she can't talk right now.
No,
she just said she can't talk. Okay. Well, thank you for joining us, Bradley.
Thank you.
And
Really enjoyed
Wanda,
it.
thank you guys.
Pleasure to be with you both today.
And you.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Lots of fun. And so we have a plan for the next one. We're going to do progressions.
Yay.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay.
See you next time.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Bye.